Go.
My name is Lane McIntosh, and this is for basic behavior analysis. We did a peak program relational training system model with a kindergarten student in the school system where I work. It is an evidence-based autism assessment and treatment program designed by Dr. Mark Dixon.
Go from the beginning.
The client chosen was a kindergarten student, 7 years old. He is a young boy with autism, and he is in a regular kindergarten classroom at the time. He has been receiving services for behavior modification and language therapy through the school system. And the primary concern at this time for his parents and teachers are his lack of social integration with peers and non-compliant behaviors. We did an indirect assessment, or I did an indirect assessment, which was an interview of the primary classroom teacher, and she was asked to complete the peak assessment interview on the skill inventory for his current repertoire of skills. She completed the skills assessment with assistance and input from the vice principal and the guidance counselor, as well as his language therapy teacher and others, adults that interact with him for a variety of settings, and people that had input into his current behaviors. The teacher listed several preferred activities and potential reinforcements and activities that he's most cooperative with. There was also a preference assessment for stimulus by asking the teacher and doing an observation on centers for 3 times prior to the beginning of the therapy session. I spoke with the mother to see what she thought his interests were. We looked at manipulatives that he would play cooperatively with, and then the client was also asked what he liked, and he was given a choice of several items such as goldfish, gummies, and marshmallows, things that he typically prefers. And he was, we did a tally on which items he preferred most often to use as the most powerful reinforcer. And the reinforcement assessment, as well as the preference and stimulus assessment, were conducted through observation trials and interviews. The environment was an office off of the main principal's office in the school building, and it was set up with 2 chairs, a table, and only the manipulatives and objects required for each program. The room was set up before this child entered so that everything would be in place and there would not be additional manipulatives and things to distract him. For program 1A, which was eye contact, there were no materials needed. For program 1B, for hand steel, there were crayons and paper, pattern blocks, and cards on the table. And for program 2B, the model to play, we used just the blocks by themselves and then the blocks and the pattern cards. The observations were conducted during PE in the gym, outside, on the playground, the lunchroom, and the speech therapy room. The programs implemented for the peak skill inventory assessment and training were 1A, eye contact, where after being given a prompt, the participant will make eye contact for 2 seconds. 1B, which is hand still. When asked, the participant will keep his or her hands still. 2B was modeled play. When shown in action, the participant will imitate simple actions with objects. 2A was in sequential order in the program, which is what is recommended when implementing the treatment, but I skipped that because the client had such a hard time with 1A, the eye contact for 2 seconds. I didn't feel that 5 seconds was going to be beneficial at this time and wanted him to experience some success. The methods used were the discrete trial training, which was recommended with the program, so that he was presented with instructions or a question or a stimulus, and immediately following a correct response was giving a reinforcer, which ended up being gummies. There was graduated prompting necessary, which were vocal cues, no hand over hand because he doesn't prefer to be touched, and there was also modeling the correct behavior. Social praise was added in addition to the edible reinforcers. For each program, the recommended material stimulus instructions were followed, and the only items present during that session, they were completed across a 3-day period over 2 weeks. Data was collected using the peak manual and the data collection charts. The parents and teachers were given information about the peak program, allowed to review it ahead of time, and written informed consent was obtained. The results of this assessment and training will be continued until there's mastery and completion of the entire program, and a BCBA has been contacted to address the non-compliant behaviors. Some of the more aggressive behaviors, he's starting to do some self-stimulatory and injurious behaviors, and for suggestions on how to interact with his peers in the classroom. The data is indicated on the graph and divided between 3 trials. Trial 1 would be eye contact. Trial 2 would be hand still. Trial 3 was program 2B, modeling appropriate play behaviors. For the data, in program 1A, the first 3 trials were the first program implemented, and they yielded 0%. We had a really hard time with some crying behaviors, some aggression, non-compliance, and it took us a while to get going. The 4th block was 24%, 5th 68%, which is indicative that the program is working because of the increase in responses exhibited and the decrease in prompting needed. Program 1B, hand still, first trial was 0. He responded more quickly to that. The second was 14, the third was 32, but we dropped off, and the 4th trial being back at 2%. He was not compliant on the 5th trial. Program 2B was modeled play. The first trial was at 14, second 10, third 12%, and the 4th and 5th trials were not completed. The program 1B, hand still, crayons and paper were on the table. He was not supposed to touch them or the teacher's materials until directed to do so, and also with the blocks and the pattern cards. For modeled play, we started with just the blocks by themselves and progressed to blocks and the pattern cards. Percentages were all based on the number of correct responses and the varying degree of prompting necessary to get the desired response. There were 10 trials for trial block and 3 to 5 prompts for question, 3 seconds for response time, and immediate reinforcement for correct responses. For this child, because he was able to start exhibiting the target behaviors, I feel that peak will be an appropriate program for him. The level of difficulty in stimulus had to be reduced just because of his current level of repertoire skills. The parents have requested services from a BCBA. The client has autism and exhibiting some more significant behaviors that need addressing from someone with that certification. At this time, he's in a regular classroom and receiving language services. And this data will be given to the BCBA to be incorporated into his behavior plan and used in the future for observations and training purposes. I wanted to add with a quote, and it says, "Autism is not a choice, acceptance is. Imagine if the opposite were true," by Stuart Duncan. And I think we're very fortunate to be able to work with the clients that we work with.